Most of them are not anyway. Convicted double murderer Scott Watson is a step closer to being able to tell his story to North and South journalist Mike White. Corrections has decided, I think wisely, not to appeal a judge's decision to allow a face-to-face meeting behind bars to go ahead. But Mike White says it is not a done deal yet. He joins me now. Mike, good morning.
Morning, Paul. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So, I mean, you've been at this a long time. You know how these things move or don't move. This is a step in the right direction. Why is it not a green light for the meeting to go ahead?
Well, the judge in her decision, when she quashed the original decision to refuse his entry to visit Scott Watson, said, look, we have to send it back to corrections to make another decision. So really the ball's back in corrections court now. They have to reconsider our original application, and then they've got to, if they agree that we can visit Scott Watson, then they've got to say what conditions there might be. But it is a step in the right direction, hopefully, after 17 years to finally hear from the man at the centre of this case.
And of course the situation here is corrections this time around know that this is very serious and that they're being watched and they're going to have to justify their decision. And the key thing from their point of view is determining whether or not your meeting with Watson would be injurious to victims, basically. Is that correct?
That was certainly the reason that they denied us access the first time round, and the judge addressed that in her decision, and she felt that, yes, that was obviously an important consideration that they had to take into account, but also Scott Watson's right to freedom of expression, especially given that he has no other rights of appeal, and the special role that media have in these cases. She felt that that outweighed the considerations of the victims in this particular case.
Remind us, Mike, what it is you hope to achieve from this meeting.
Well, really, it's just to let Scott Watson have his say after 17 years, Paul. You know, he has not spoken publicly about this. This is a case that fascinates, vexes and confuses people.
There's a great deal of public interest in this.
There's a great deal of public interest and there's a great deal of public concern also, especially given the evidence that's come out since the trial. And I think that, you know, hearing from the man at the centre of this case would help the public understand better and perhaps help us all understand whether we've had the right man in jail for the past 17 years or not.
Yeah, and I think there are a great many people like me who don't believe he is guilty as charged, that's for sure. He has just been refused parole with a psychologist at the parole board saying that he believed Watson had a very high risk of committing violent acts if he was released from prison. What's your judgment on that?
Well, I know that Kerry Cook, who's Scott Watson's lawyer, was very upset about the parole decision, and Scott Watson's family also are challenging that psychologist's report. They feel that there are a number of areas that are incorrect. There's incorrect information that was used selectively and was biased, and some of it was just plain wrong. And so they're challenging that report, which was the basis for the parole board decision, or one of the bases for it.
Is it one of those things, though, where Watson is in the tricky position of not really being eligible for parole on many counts because he refuses to admit guilt?
I mean, it's the total catch-22. For 17 years he said, I'm not guilty, and now one of the grounds for being released on parole is if you show contrition or a confession.
Which you can't show if you are not prepared to admit guilt.
If you're innocent. I mean, it's a ridiculous situation. Do you have to confess to something you didn't do in order to get your freedom? It seems incredibly unreasonable, and this is one of the very difficult grounds that prisoners who are wrongly convicted face when they come up for parole. It's not impossible to get out when you're still professing your innocence. I mean,
it's not without precedent.
No, we've had Peter Ellis and David Tamahiri, you know, continue to profess their innocence and were eventually released on parole. But look at Tainapura, 12 parole hearings, Paul, before he got out, and no one thinks that Tainapura was guilty.
You know what, Mike, just this conversation that I'm having with you now, I think people listening to this, watching this, will be thinking this is why it would be interesting to see the result of your meeting with Scott Watson. So hopefully it goes ahead sooner rather than later. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Paul. Cheers.
Mike White, North and South journalist, he has spent a great deal of energy on the Scott Watson case. And I mean, seriously, how many of us truly believe Watson is guilty as charged? It's almost impossible for that to be the case.